Let me give you just a little bit about my background, and then I'll let my colleagues do the same for their background. I was a middle school social studies teacher, began teaching in South Carolina 12 years ago, and was able to move through a career ladder in South Carolina from a career teacher to a mentor teacher to a master teacher. And currently, I serve at the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching as the Executive Vice President and Chief Learning Officer.
Hello, my name is Ed Alarcio. I'm a teacher in the Lucia Martin Public School District. I've been an elementary teacher, middle school teacher, a leadership teacher, and now serving as a master teacher at middle school.
And Joshua Barnett, I got involved with TAP about a decade ago doing my dissertation on a teacher advancement program that's operating in Arkansas. It was my interest. Ended up doing an evaluation of the Merit program for the last 10 years. I've been doing research on teacher evaluation, compensation reform, and I've joined NIET after being a faculty member at Arizona State University. Thanks for having me.
So at NIET, we're a nonprofit. We have offices on the West Coast, East Coast, and then in Central as well. We have two signature initiatives. As you can see, that's maybe a little bit in the back. We have two signature initiatives at NIET. We have our Best Practices Center and our TAP system. And if I could just spend a moment talking about both of those and also putting into context that at NIET, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. So we are not a for-profit company, so rather a nonprofit. In our Best Practices Center, we've had an opportunity to work with states and state departments of education in Ohio, Texas, Tennessee, and Indiana to push educator quality and comprehensive school reform forward. And you can see some of the numbers with the different numbers of educators that we've had opportunities to work with in each of those states. And what I thought we would do also, as we talk through the TAP system, is to spend about 20 minutes just sort of explaining TAP and how TAP leadership and other components fit together, and then certainly give you plenty of time to ask any questions that you'd like to of us from our experiences. So the next piece of TAP, or what we consider the signature initiative at NIET, is the TAP system. The TAP system is comprised of four major components. If you were to open your packet that hopefully everyone has on your place in front of you, you'll notice we have one brochure that explains in great detail all of these four components and gives more information. So what we're going to do is use these four components of TAP as the anchor as we go through and talk about how this notion of multiple career paths tied to ongoing applied professional growth, tied to instructionally focused accountability, and then a performance-paid compensation piece, all tied together to form the TAP system. Another thing that I'd like to draw your attention to in your packet, and this is on the left side, it's an article written for the Center for American Progress several years ago by Craig Gerald. And what we like about this was it was a great outside look at the alignment of the TAP system. Because if I can flip back for a moment, sometimes we've seen different states and districts put different pieces of this initiative together. But one of the great things about Align by Design is it really shows how each of these is aligned and interwoven with the other. And I think as we start to talk about, and Ed and Josh go into multiple career paths and the professional development and the observations and even the performance-based compensation, I hope that you can see the alignment as we call through there. One of the things that I do want to bring out with the TAP system, now operating in around 400 schools across the nation, from South Carolina to California, Indiana, Texas, and I can go, we're in a total of 10 states with schools in multiple districts in those states. But what I consider one of the real benefits of the TAP system is while we have these four components, there's a tremendous amount of local flexibility and local control on how exactly those are implemented. So the different districts and even different states are really able to customize and tweak these components when this goes into the buildings. So with that, I'd like to now drill into the four components of TAP and spend just a little bit of time on those. So the first component is this idea of multiple career paths. In TAP schools, we have career teachers. And those are teachers who have not elected to take on any additional professional development responsibilities in the building, and they're 100% based on the classroom, they're based in the classroom. And then we have mentor teachers in town. And mentor teachers are those who still teach in normally a full class load, but based on scheduling, are able to get 1 to 2 hours a week to go and provide support and professional development and coaching to other teachers. And then in a TAP school, we also have master teachers. And master teachers, depending on the schools, often are either full release or 0.5 release to the professional development meetings and provide support. Josh, you want to talk a little bit about the research behind the whole thing?
So again, just to try to give you a sense, as you well know, one of the issues in education is that teachers often leave the field altogether because they don't have an opportunity for staying in the classroom or staying connected to instructional practice. And they either find a new career path because they feel as though they might not be rewarded, or they're forced to go into administration, which also removes them from the classroom. And so watching this trend happen over the last decade, really the last 20, 30 years, we've seen a clear stance of trying to find ways to keep those teachers involved to instructional practices. And what the TAP model does is it really provides multiple solutions for those two problems of sending people out of the classroom. First, because you have these career mentor and master teachers, you have multiple tracks that allow people to keep high-quality folks connected to instructional and keeping them with instruction allows them to touch classrooms and continue to touch students. You also allow teachers to lead other teachers. So you don't have this disconnect between administration coming in and saying, this is what we should do, this is sort of the plan. You allow teachers to develop this at the local level, working in unison with one another. And finally, clear evidence has shown over the last 10 to 15 years that there's this collective leadership policy when teachers lead one another when it comes to the ground floor, that you have a much better spirit of collaboration and unison with what's going on. With that, I'll turn it over to Ed and let him tell you a little bit about how this has worked in one of our local situations.
Hello. First, I'd like to tell you just a little bit about myself before I talk about the TAP system. I've been a teacher for 30 years. This is my 30th year in the program, as far as a teacher. I always had glowing reviews as an educator. When the administrator would come in, it was always positive. It was always like a super great job. In 2009, I was teacher of the year for our entire district. In 2010, I was introduced to the TAP system. And after my first year of core training, my first core training, I wanted to apologize to every single one of my students. That's how powerful this system can be. It's just a way for teachers to grow beyond what they thought they could do, and that was what it is for me. The cluster implementation, which is our professional development, is nothing like most professional development that we've ever seen. Usually in a district, teachers would go to a conference or they would call somebody in to have professional development brought to them. And you get pretty excited about the certain thing that they're talking about, and then you go back to your classroom and you forget about that exciting thing, and you don't have time for that exciting thing, and you don't have support for that exciting thing. Well, the difference in this system is the master teachers, mentor teachers are in classrooms every single day. They're there to support the teachers, they're there to team teach with them, they're there to model for them. All this takes place in cluster or professional development. So master teachers plan the cluster, they implement the cluster. The very great thing about TAP is also the strategy that we implement in our school. The strategy is based on data that we get back from our STAR test, which are our state test scores, and also our district assessment. Based on information, we develop a strategy that is going to best help our kids achieve where they need to be on the state test. So the strategy that we implement through cluster is based on the kids that are in our seats. And we field test all the information before we present it to the cluster members. And then during cluster, they develop what we call a chunk of the cluster, and then we go and help them implement the cluster and the strategy in the classroom. So this is all about leadership, but it comes from the teacher's point of view. I was a teacher, they know that I'm one of them, it's not an administrator, I'm just one of them, so it's very helpful in that respect. Anything else?
Observations, coaches,
Okay, observations. We're in the classroom. For instance, if we had a cluster on Tuesday, we would support those teachers, every one of those teachers in that Tuesday cluster before their next Tuesday cluster. coaching, we'd be in the classroom, and in informal observation, we just go in, observe them, give them feedback, talk to them about a specific lesson, and then they try to implement what they have. They also have what they call IGPs. They pick a goal that they would like to achieve, and they work on that goal, we observe them on that goal, we give them feedback on that goal. There is the formal observation that takes place in our districts. It's 3 observations a year, and those are the formally scored observations.
So the basic outline of the role of the master teacher, number 1, is planning for and delivering professional development within the school. And that professional development can happen in a meeting, like a professional learning community or a small group of teachers who are able to meet together, or that PD can look like an observation and then a coaching session that really goes into the pedagogy of the lesson. So that support can look several different ways. Another integral piece to the TAP system, not only the master and mentor teachers, but also the TAP principals. One of the things that we encourage our principals through the days of training before implementation is to ensure that they're taking a very participatory leadership style, not a top-down autocratic style, but more of involving the master teachers, mentor teachers, even career teachers as well, in formulating a viable school plan and school goal, and in carrying out those observations in the PD that all professional development that all align to whatever school goal they've selected. Because we really think that this notion of a shared leadership team separates the TAP system from a lot of other programs and initiatives where it's very person-focused. The other thing that we find is that schools who implement the TAP system are able to utilize the resources they have in their buildings and the human capital they have in their buildings versus having to spend dollars to bring an outside consultant for 1 day or 2 days a year with very little follow-up. So we find that this is a much more aligned and integrated system for professional development.
So the research, again, moving back to professional development, thinking of the problems and then the solutions that this system offers. The problem, as Chase alluded to with professional development, is you either get a one-shot sort of drive-by professional development. Someone shows up and says, here's what we'd like to do. This is supposed to help your school. And we have clear evidence that this rarely works because, as Ed said, it rarely transfers back to the classroom. Someone takes the notes, they think it's great, they're excited, they give them great evaluations on their in-house form, and then they go back and they forget everything that they've learned. And this is pretty typical that we see time and time again. Or you have, in addition to these third-party individuals coming in, they also are not familiar with the situation of the local school. They don't understand the culture, they don't understand the climate. The solution of having embedded professional development and embedded professional growth locally grown is that it comes from the teachers themselves. So it's collaborative, they know the culture, they know the situation, they know what they need specifically. It's also ongoing, so rather than the one shot, if they need a second dose, they do it. They make that determination at their level. It's also targeted for their school and structured around their environment. So again, if they need one shot, they get one shot. If they need 4 or 5, they can always come back to the same topic rather than having to plan it ahead of time or come up with a different system. So it's something that from the evidence, nationally, we see that this is where the trend is going for where it is most effective and the most effective way to use it in schools for change. With that, I'll turn it back over to these guys.
Well, and one of the questions that I always ask Ed is, Ed, you've been teaching for how many years?
This is my 30.
In 30 years, how many times did you have an opportunity to teach with a colleague before implementing the TAP system?
2.
How many times did you have an opportunity to ask a colleague to come in and model a strategy or a lesson in your classroom with your students?
0.
So again, one of the real benefits of the TAP system is to provide that type of support for teachers so that we're doing 2 things. The master teachers and TAP students, number 1, is they go in and model lessons. They're having an opportunity to teach not just confined to one classroom, but they're having an opportunity to leverage their expertise in all the classrooms across the building to do 2 things. Number 1, to deliver instruction to the students. But at the same time, they're also building capacity with their colleagues and the other teachers as well. So again, one of the benefits of having this career ladder, multiple career paths, and especially with the master teacher. One of the things I want to touch on just very quickly, and I want to be cognizant of time as well, is this professional development. Within TAP, one of the things that we make is a non-negotiable, and we don't have many of those because there's a lot of flexibility. But one of the non-negotiables is that teachers meet in small groups once a week for at least 50 minutes. And when you look across the different states that implement the system, in Louisiana provides a good example. Originally, they met for 50 minutes, and they found those meetings so powerful, they increased those to 90 minutes every week. So that's the investment they made because they realized this was different from their typical professional development. So they increased from 50 minutes weekly to 90 minutes a week. These groups of teachers, these professional learning communities, are clustered differently, usually depending on the grade level. What we find is that in middle school and high school, a lot of these meetings are very content and subject specific, but if we look at the elementary school grade levels, we tend to find that they're more grade level specific. And then Ed, would you like to talk us through the 5 steps of effective learning? This is sort of what I would consider the action research backbone of the TAPS professional development.
All right. There's essentially 5 parts to a cluster meeting, and the first part is the identify part of it, where we're identifying the need of the students. And all of that information is we set goals based again on our CST scores and our district assessments. So we have our yearly cluster goal, our school cluster goal, and then our cycle cluster goal. We're pretty much focused on the cycle cluster goal. The first cycle is the rubric, so we're talking about the rubric and the observation process. And then typically the second cycle is about the strategy. The strategy is always based on student need. For instance, at our serial need with inferring. So our entire strategy would be a student strategy based on helping students to infer. And then during the cluster, we'll present a chunk of the chunk. It's a small portion of the strategy. And we'll present that, model it to our teachers, and we'll have a 20-minute period, 30-minute period to develop the strategy so that they walk into their classroom ready to go with that chunk. One of the big things we emphasize in our district is there's no TAP homework. When you leave cluster, you are finished with the work that you need to do that week, other than implement the strategy. And then there's always the process of follow-up. The follow-up in the classrooms, in the rubric cycle is to help them understand how to incorporate parts of the rubric throughout the lesson. And during the strategy, it's to help them implement the strategy, either team teach it with them, model it for them, or just observe and help them coach them through this.
Well, and just in the interest of time, one of the things I want to make sure that I draw out on this is that for any strategy in these schools to come in and be presented to a group of teachers, and this is what connects back to the master teachers. Those master teachers have found that strategy, but they've vetted it. They've tried it out in the building and have both qualitative and quantitative evidence that it's effective in that building, so that when teachers come to these professional learning communities, they know that they're not having their time wasted. And again, this goes back to several complaints when you hear about professional development and you hear things, well, this is not relevant for me, and we're just getting these strategies from someone from the outside. Every teacher in this professional learning community knows that that strategy has been effective in that particular school with those particular students. And again, the fourth piece here, one of the most important pieces, is the application. Because after every professional learning community meeting that goes on, the master teacher is going to go into each of the classrooms of the teachers in that group, and they're going to either observe, team teach, or do a model lesson. And again, the goal is to build capacity among the teachers and to really create a support network. And then this final phase is the evaluation. We want to be data-driven. So we want to let the student data drive what happens in the next professional development meeting.
So the next component of this is really fair and clear evaluations, which is central to obviously everything we've talked about providing those tailored professional development sessions. Is in order to have that, you have to be able to fairly and clearly assess the people in your school. And the TAP framework does that by ultimately relying on a series of a series of evaluations that are grounded in what is the leading research of all the different frameworks or rubrics that are available to us. So looking across 7 different consortiums working in this area over the last 15, 20 years, we've developed what we believe to be the most comprehensive and most effective way to look at evaluating teachers. And we have clear evidence that this is working. So if you look on this slide here, you'll see 19 key skills and pieces of knowledge that teachers need to have. This is what they're evaluated on. This is what they're examined by not only once a year, but multiple times a year by multiple people. So again, rather than the drive-by evaluation from someone who walks into a classroom, spends a few minutes, or perhaps doesn't even spend that much time in some classrooms, you get multiple evaluations from multiple people, which helps to ensure that you have high-quality information for how you need to change and what you need to do to move forward. The other element of this is that it's aligned with the future. It's aligned with where things are going nationally. The Common Core movement TAP system is already aligned with this next phase of the evaluation by focusing on critical thinking, focusing on classroom and student level issues, problem solving, and collaboration. And then I wanted to get to this slide just to give you a sense of, again, comparing what happens elsewhere versus what happens in TAP schools that Ned's been kind of walking you through throughout. If you notice the red bars, you see this is the way typical evaluations are done in schools. Most teachers receive high marks. They're told they're an excellent teacher. Ed referenced this earlier where he won an award after teaching for 30 years and would felt as though he was an excellent teacher. And yet, once he received a TAP evaluation on those 19 frameworks, he recognized maybe I'm not doing all the things that I should be doing. Because the information he had beforehand told him he was great. But once you use a much more structured evaluation that relies on the best evidence, you can see that we start to see a natural curve in our teachers. We see teachers who we can locate clear areas for improvement. Lots of times teachers simply receive high marks because it's unknown what they need to do to improve. And in the TAP system, we have clear examples for how to help them improve and in the development for that process we talked about earlier. With that, I'll turn it back over to Jason to talk a little bit about how that data is kept and what we use it for.
So very briefly, one of the things that we designed to TAP that any state who was looking to launch a new observation system and to utilize the tag lead from that system would be some type of online web-based system to house observations that actually use the data, not just have it, but use it. So here's an example of the type of report that would be very beneficial for principals, for teacher leaders, to be able to look at when different observers in the same building or going into classes, are they seeing things the same way? In other words, do we have good inter-rater reliability or inter-rater consistency? Those are very key points to make sure that the observers in a building are sending out the same and a consistent, accurate message about what is good instruction and how any rubric, whether it's the TAP rubric or another rubric, should be interpreted in the classrooms. So again, one of the key features is having some type of system so that the leaders in the building and at the district level and even at the state level can track this notion of inter-rater reliability and inter-rater consistency. Another tool that could be used from this, and one of the things that we didn't mention with the observation, is that every time a teacher is observed, there's an area of reinforcement and an area of refinement. Reinforcement being something that went well and how we can transfer and keep continuing that practice in our instruction, and refinement being something that could be tweaked to be even more effective. So another tool then that could be used for the professional development is to look at the trends at the school level to see, if you look at this particular rubric, that the lesson structure and pacing seems to be something that the teachers, in this example, would need to really address, and that the teacher leaders, along with the principal, would want to focus the support in the class on this notion of lesson structure and pacing.
The performance-based compensation, I'm not going to speak a lot about that because in our school and I think throughout our district, that really hasn't been an issue with those involved with that. It's been more of an issue with those who are not involved with that, and I won't go there. But at our school, for instance, I would say probably 96% of the teachers care more about getting better at their craft than the bonus. And truly, at our school, it's never even talked about. Nobody ever asks questions about it. It really is, at the end of the year, it's just that it's a little bonus, but that's not the focus of what we do at our school. It's about getting better at our craft and helping our students achieve higher.
And to echo what Nate said, what we've learned really with regard to performance-based compensation after the last 10 years with all the tip cycles and all the different startups and different places developing this, is that simply giving more resources to teachers isn't an effective plan. Simply throwing more money into the system isn't a good idea, unless it's connected to components. And that's what the TAP system does. It connects rewards to clearly designed steps that teachers take to improve their practice, improve their performance. As they become better teachers, teacher quality improves, student achievement improves. And this is the linchpin of evaluation that we've seen happen in Point Survey in New York City and other places where different merit-based schemes were operated. And to give you a sense, one of the concerns that always comes across with money whenever we look at resources is that you will drive down collegiality, you will drive down collaboration. And again, because of the tenets of the TAP system, because of these components that we've talked about, we don't see that. What I'd like to draw your attention to is the graph in the bottom on the right-hand side. And what you see there is that even over the last 7 years of this program, you see that 90% of teachers see the collegiality or higher. It's been 90% and 93%. And it's stayed at that threshold throughout this time frame that we've been operating this program, because teachers see, as I said, the collaboration and collegiality that is required as part of the program to develop their skills, develop that professional development, work as teams, and they see this as a real need in the system. From that, just a couple of results, issues that you'd like to see. Obviously, we want to know that this is making a difference, not simply good theory, but good in practice, and see that it is leading to change. What this graph shows you is that the Algiers Charter Association was operating at about a 14-point deficit from the state average, as it was much lower than the state average. And after 4 years of this system, they surpassed the state average. So essentially, they made up an 18-point gap on math. And the next slide, you'll see that they also made up an 18-point gap in ELA. And this is a district, mind you, that is about 25% higher free and reduced lunch rate than the state average. So in a higher needs, higher poverty, struggling district, they still made tremendous gains. And so this gives you a glimpse as to what the impact of this is, because we can change and improve teacher quality, which then translates into improved achievement. The next couple of slides are also beyond, as Jason mentioned earlier, the TAP system. We've had different places implement components from the Best Practices Center. This shows a statewide gain. So again, Algiers was a single district, comparing that to the state, but this was a situation where it was implemented statewide, and we see an increase again over a 3-year period across multiple subjects. So these are hopefully just to give you an indication that the evidence tells us that the way that this program was designed was to fit with the best practices and the current cutting-edge research that tells us what works in the schools. And we've got the evidence to showcase that these programs are effective in driving change and end-of-course exams, in ELA, in math, and improving achievement gaps between different groups of people. And with that, I think we'd like to conclude our portion and those of any questions that you guys might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you taking the time. Just a couple of questions. I'm curious about how the TAP teachers and how the districts that you were working in dealt with student teachers. Who was allowed to have student teachers? How did they coordinate that?
I'm going to let you answer that because he's currently in the TAP school.
In our district, there isn't a specific way that student teachers are assigned to different schools and in different classrooms. Essentially, it's the school contact our district and say we need to place some student teachers, and we'll take it. Something that's very exciting that's coming down the line is Cal Poly State University, which is 20 minutes away from us. They are going to institute the rubric in their student teaching program. We will not graduate from Cal Poly unless you know what that's all about. We're going to get top teachers. That will be amazing.
So there's not an extra effort to put student teachers with mentor or master teachers?
No, they're not currently.
And that's in the Lucia Mar School District. We have several districts in Louisiana specifically who do tend to match their student teachers, typically with mentor teachers, because the mentor teachers teach a full load. The master teachers, because of their release time, that's not a great fit for a student teacher. But I know in several districts, Ascension Parish, DeSoto Parish in Louisiana, they've tried to match up their student teachers with their mentor teachers. And Ed mentioned Cal Poly University. You know, one of the things that we're most excited about is our new higher ed partnerships. In actually every teacher prep program in the state of Tennessee, Arizona State University, and Texas Tech, where as part of their undergraduate and clinical experience, they're going out and they're learning the PAP rubric and they're being observed and coached. And again, in those cases, they are with the mentor teachers as well.
And then I noticed you said there were highly reduced lunch numbers in some of the schools that we're dealing with. What about mobility rates? Because one of the things that we've seen is that many of our kids are moving in and out of these classrooms. It's difficult to teach kids while they're there. And so I'm just curious about that, and were there high mobility rates, and did it make any difference in terms of the performance in those schools?
There definitely was. I mean, it's a struggling district. They have all the same issues that I think that you can imagine: high poverty, highly disadvantaged students, low performers, high mobility. And in the areas where we watched this operate, perhaps in Arizona and Phoenix, where I'm from, they're watching the mobility rate of the students always changing as the districts overlap so much. Then we continue to see that because the program is changing the teachers, that it's ultimately able to impact student achievement across all whoever comes in front of it, whoever comes into the class.
To give you, if I may give you a specific example, if you look in Deer Valley Unified School District in Arizona, the school is Constitution Elementary School. Their mobility rate is around 35–40% annually. And then if you look at their student growth with TAP, on our 1 to 5 scale, 5 being significantly above the years before, they were a 5 in their first year of implementation.
Thanks for being here. I'll put this question for all three of you again. Do you have any requirements for advanced education at the master level?
It was not required that you had a master's degree, that you just had to have a valid teaching credential. As far as becoming a master teacher, it's an interview process, and the interview process was quite intimidating. It was 28 to 35 people in the interview committee, and you have to interview every year. You don't automatically get to be a master teacher. As far as after the first year, you have to have certain qualifications, and for master teachers, on a scale of 1 to 5, we have to average a 4, whereas the career teachers have to average a 2.5, and mentor teachers, I'm not sure if I think maybe there's a 3.5 for the mentor teachers. So our standards, we are held to a little bit higher than the career teachers and a little bit higher than the mentor teachers, but it's not on that.
At the national level, we have an implementation manual that gives some ideas for when you're posting for these positions. Here's some suggestions. And of course, we do suggest if the master teachers have a master's degree or national board certification, that's great. But what you'll find, this goes back to the local flexibility and local control. They make decisions based on the people and that. What I will point out is that Ed's experience applying with a group of 35 people in the interview committee is pretty atypical.
Yes.
I haven't seen that outside of that district and Ed's experience. But normally, and especially in our newer projects, we look at sort of a threefold process. Number one, let's look at the pedagogy. How are the master teachers at teaching? Then let's look at their student achievement growth results, if those are available. But third, one of the things that we've learned over the years is, and sports is sometimes a great analogy, sometimes the best players don't make the best coaches. And a critical component of the master teacher role is being a good coach. And so some things that come, almost innately to some people, they have a very tough time breaking that down into the small steps that others need. And so part of the third sort of piece of this is that the master teachers are able to, how are they able to coach and work with adults? And that's the third component. So how are they teaching, how is it growth, but also how do they relate and coach with adults?
And that kind of transitions to my next question. And I noticed in the slide I had the 19 different areas that you critique, which are very impressive. And I assume within those, what I want for you can critique somebody on their relational skills as a teacher. How does that play into it? If you're evaluating somebody, are you able to critique somebody and say, you need to enhance that, work on that? Some of those things are innate in somebody. And
So if you look on the PowerPoint here, again, my apologies, this is sort of tough to see from the back, but the right column of implementing instruction, those 12 indicators are sort of what's happening with the instructional delivery in the classroom. If you look on the left column at the very bottom where it says responsibilities, I think the things that you're getting at in that question come with what other professional responsibilities do you have as a teacher in the building? Proper attire, attending staff development, and those things that you wouldn't necessarily see in one lesson, but you would see that at the end. Those responsibilities are actually done in survey format, and it's actually a 360 survey. So it gives all teachers a chance in our system. Career teachers also observe and complete the survey on their mentor and master teachers. Mentor teachers complete it on career and master teachers, and master teachers complete it on the mentor and career teacher. So it becomes a very much a 360 type survey in the classroom.
Right now, you can go as far as say the areas of motivating students, managing student behavior,
Sure.
two key areas that students at school know who's good at that and not.
Most definitely. And one of the great things, and John alluded to this in the rubric, is that as you move sort of from proficiency to exemplary, what you see in the exemplary instruction, this is what aligns so well with Common Core, is it becomes a much more student-centered classroom versus a teacher-centered classroom as you move above proficiency to exemplary.
And quite honestly, you were talking about kind of the environment, respect, culture. You can have conversations, and that's the great part about TAP, is you can have those conversations. If you walk into a science teacher's classroom and pure chaos is taking place, you can have those hard conversations afterwards in a positive way and say, why don't you try these couple of things? And so Jason always talks about capacity. You begin to understand the capacity of every teacher on your staff, and you begin to understand what they can handle in certain chunks. But you can certainly make progress in all of those things. And like you said, some things aren't innate. Certainly, managing student behavior is not innate in some people. It's more innate for people who have been a coach because they know they are in those situations. So all of those things can be taken care of through discussions with the career teachers and the masters. And that's the great thing about the TAP system. It allows for that to happen.
Thank you. Thank you again for coming. I have a couple other questions. Do you have a mentor program for your beginning teachers that is different than the role that the mentor plays in your building?
So I'll start with that, and if you want to talk about what you do with your district, but I'll tell you what we suggest nationally. And again, you'll find that different districts have a different flavor on how they implement certain things. One of the things with new teachers, especially coming into a school that has this system in place, for a brand new teacher, that can be a little bit intimidating. So one of the things that we've done is we've structured so that they already, the new teachers have their professional development during the school day like everybody else. But master teachers will also offer classes, for lack of a better phrase, and opportunities to provide additional support, both in the class, outside the class, coming into the master's class, or watching them teach. So, yeah, new teachers, it's almost sort of this class or cohort that you'll see for sometimes the fall semester, sometimes fall and spring, to, pardon the phrase, to sort of bring the new teachers up to speed and to acclimate them to what the TAP system is in the building.
That's very similar to what Jason just said. This being our second year, so everybody was first year last year, so everybody got the training. In our school, we had 7 new teachers, and there were, I think, 15 new teachers at TAP sites this year. So our district offered TAP classes, I guess you could call them, in the summer. They were voluntary. And then we also offered more training as school started so they could get a good understanding of what this looks and sounds like with the rubric. And then we also offered to anybody on staff many practice observations that they wanted before the actual observation cycle started. So, and 18 teachers took us up on that, just so they could get a feel again what it looks and sounds like when that happens.
And if I could add one more thing to that, the other thing that we developed, and with new teachers in mind as well, is a training portal so that the new teachers weren't always dependent on the local master and mentor teachers, but there was also an online resource where they could go and get training through these 15-minute training modules that do a deep dive on those different indicators from our rubric. So we created a portal, which I have on the screen here, for all teachers, but we found specifically it's great for new teachers because it gives PD in small, digestible chunks.
And then what is the cost for a local district or a state to participate in the TAP program?
So the costs really vary, and that's why it's very hard to give exact numbers because it depends on aspects that are already in place. One of the suggestions, and we can throw out, as I maybe can articulate this a little bit, you'll see how some districts have resources that would be morphed into master teacher positions. For example, sometimes we have literacy coaches or instructional facilitators. Those positions are great, but hopefully Ed's articulated how the master teacher position is that much and a lot more in terms of intensive support and capacity building. So our suggested ratio, and again, this varies so much depending on the school and what the needs are, but between one of these master teachers, who may be full or maybe half release, for about 15 to 20 teachers. But again, I do want to point out, especially in some of the high schools, that those ratios are a little bit larger. Sometimes master teachers maybe teach a little bit more, and so the ratios are a little bit larger on those. So when you're thinking about the total cost, you think about the replacement teacher cost. And then the other cost associated is the performance-based compensation piece. So some districts will allocate, and again, it varies from $1,500 to, I think, $3,000 is the highest that I'm aware of, allocated per teacher annually into the performance award pool. So what we typically do, when we have a district or a school that's interested, is we really sit down with the principal or the superintendent to understand their current funding structure and to really try to make a system that works. And, knock on wood, but most of the time when we've been able to sit down with schools and districts, if this is something that they want to make a priority, there are ways to adjust budget and adjust the way the system looks to make implementation very possible.
And again, I was basically asking about the fees that you might charge as for your system, for your database of instructional strategies,
Sure.
and all your online evaluation materials and that kind of thing. What?
So that was a very long answer.
Yeah.
So what I will tell you on that is that as a nonprofit, our charitable purpose is educator quality, increasing educator quality. Whenever we're on site, we have a daily rate is fairly negligible. So when we go and do the training, it's about $1,000 a day for the training, and the training is between 4 and 7 days, depending on how much of the system you put in place. The portal that you saw is $1,000 per year per school, and that's really the only required expense. And again, that's to keep all the materials refreshed, and we're actually doing a portal redesign right now.
We have about 7 minutes left. We've got 3 other people. So
I just wanted to make sure I had the answer to the question about those things.
Representative Gaines.
Thank you. I really enjoyed your presentation. Being a former arts teacher, I'm always interested in number one, how many arts teachers do you have at your school? How well can they be mentored? How much collaboration is possible among them? And what is the potential of them being presented among lesson in their own curriculum?
At our school, because of budget and whatnot, we're down to very few electives, but one of our classes is an art class, and we also have a music class.
Visual arts?
Yes.
Painting or?
Yes, they paint, they draw, they do that kind of stuff. As far as support, they get the exact same support that the rest of the teachers do. There's always somebody that we can talk to on campus, even if it's the art teacher themselves. But generally speaking, within the TLT team, there's somebody that we can always go to for advice and assistance when we come to maybe something we don't are as familiar with, and we seek out advice from each other on the TLT.
One of the things that you may want to really like here is that when you look across TAP nationally, you see a lot of master teachers who are art, physical education, special education backgrounds. You see a lot of those in the master teacher position. One of the newer aspects that we're working on right now in Tennessee and some of our more rural sites is this notion of master teachers not being tethered to one school, but for example, being able to use the expertise with art across multiple schools. In fact, this portal that I showed you a moment ago, in part of the rebuild, it's not only to do that in person, but also to try to work and to be able to do that virtually as well, so that we're able to use virtual networks of art teachers or PE teachers, music teachers, and one master teacher in that, to even be able to do observations through our portal, not about observations, and then provide some coaching feedback as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Representative Jules Meyer.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentation. I know on slides 26 and 27 you talk about student achievement. With your system, do you have any data talking about the achievement gap? You know, how your system has been able to improve, maybe what some of the states have passed, you know, in addressing that issue itself?
Well, the Algiers network that I mentioned previously was a pretty big increase. But the achievement gap in particular, I think probably the most exciting data that we've seen and just came out this year is in one of our Arkansas sites, which is also a rural school district in Lincoln, Arkansas, where on 5 out of 6 measures, including math and reading, so it was 2 of the math and 3 of the reading measures across grade level, elementary, middle, and high school. So the Lincoln school improved in the achievement gap on 5 of the 6 of those measures. And so we do have evidence that this is closing, that the achievement gap is able to be closed based on the system. And again, it's really a priority because it's a system that's built on improving student achievement through improving teacher quality. And so all of the efforts that we talked about, all of the different things that we utilize are really intended to improve the teacher's ability to work with all those students. But we do have good evidence that shows achievement gap gains.
Oh, I was just going to say, Judge, I'm not sure if you have this number on the top of your head, but I think our free and reduced lunch percentage average across our 400 TAP schools is around 75%.
That sounds good.
It's around 75%. And again, one of the set of schools that we're so proud of is a set of schools here in Algiers who, and again, we understand that this type of achievement doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen without a very rigorous implementation of whatever system that you utilize. But we're able to overcome the state average even with almost a 20 percentage point discrepancy on free and reduced lunch.
Could you give us some of that evidence-based data that you have and in the school systems that you've implemented your program?
Definitely.
I have one last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for your time here. And I would just like to know on these, what assessments did you use to determine these outcomes that show, you know, that the way you did this now and the way you did it before come up with it?
It's the statewide test for different places. So in Tennessee, it was their state test, and in Louisiana, it's their state test. That's what we're looking at. In Lincoln, it was also the state test, the Arkansas state test, as well as their benchmark data. And so what we mostly are looking at is statewide improvement, because we've looked at district to district on certain comparisons, but what we're now looking at is are they growing against the statewide average? And so that's, again, what Jason alluded to is what's so exciting about what happened in Algiers across those 4 years, is you see an 18-point turnaround from well below the state average to actually achieving above the state average.
Were those assessments